Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace and welcome to Path and Present podcast. This week, the guest is Youssef Kromah, and we recorded this podcast in Cairo, Egypt, where I am visiting the brother, and we had a good conversation about a number of things, and we'll let you have it. I won't share too much because we get into it in the podcast. But first and foremost, I want to say one love and peace, and thanks for listening to everybody. We're really grateful to share these podcasts with you. If you do have any questions that you'd like addressed on the podcast, we'd love to answer those, and from time to time we get those. But if you have any questions that you'd like addressed on the podcast, you can send an email to connect@barakablue.com. Or you could write us on Twitter at Baraka Blue, and we'll try to answer some questions in some of these episodes as well from the audience. If you would like to support this podcast, and this podcast is completely listener supported, as you notice, it's ad free, and you guys make it happen. You can through Patreon. So I want to first and foremost thank everybody who is a supporter on Patreon. You make this possible, and we pray that all the blessing and all the goodness is written in your account, because each one of these conversations is because of you. And you can support with as little as $1 a month, and if everybody who listens were to give $5 or $10 a month, we will be solid. And so that goes to just supporting the podcast and the costs involved and allowing us to do this with regularity and frequency. And our page is patreon.com/pathandpresent. You can find the link in our SoundCloud as well. So, yeah, I got some dates coming up in Europe. I'm doing a festival in Berlin, September 19th through 22nd. And I'll be sharing the flyer for that on my social media soon. And it looks like I'll also be going to Abu Dhabi for an artist in residence at NYU Abu Dhabi. We're still working out the details on that, but that's for this fall. And then, as we get into the fall, we got a lot of other programs. So check the social media for announcements on those. But that's about it for now. And I wish everybody a blessed day or evening, wherever it may be. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. So we are sitting in al-Qahira, Dunya, the mother of the lower world.
Yes.
Egypt, Cairo. We're drinking coffee, and alhamdulillah, we're sitting in the house of my brother Youssef, and he's been graciously hosting me. So it's good to have you on the podcast. We had to record one with you while I'm here.
Alhamdulillah, man. It's an honor to be here.
And we had to turn the AC off. So we're just gonna sweat it out for this one. We wanted to increase the listening pleasure for the listeners at the expense of our own comfort. Alhamdulillah. And hopefully the Egyptian street won't too overwhelm the sounds as it is wont to do. But now you live in a nice kind of quiet for Egypt area, real nice area. Alhamdulillah. But yeah, man. So how does a young brother that grows up in Philadelphia come to reside in Egypt and be a student at al-Azhar?
Man, subhanAllah, I always had this drive in me to seek knowledge. I started attending madrasa, learning fiqh and aqeedah and stuff like that when I was about 12. And that really put a desire in me for knowledge. I used to go to madrasa, and then I would have all these aqeedah questions, man. So my teacher would come to my house and then double teach me in the home. So when I graduated high school, I did my first year in a public high school in West Philly High. And on my first day of school, I remember my dad buying me these really nice sneakers, man. And I got to the third floor, and this kid was like, yo, those sneakers are really nice. I was like, thank you, man. Like, give them to me. You know?
Come about
yeah,
them.
yeah. My first day in public school, man, in Philly, because I was going to school out in the burbs. So I got in a fist fight, man. My first day of school, not even making it to homeroom, I was suspended. So you can imagine how the rest of the year went. Like, I fought almost every day, man, in high school. Until, like, in the middle of the year, some Muslim brothers, when they found out I was Muslim, they really came to my aid, and I had no problems then.
Other students?
Yeah, some other students in higher grades, like the 10th, 11th, 12th. Then, you know, I had, like, armed security guys, you know, like, not armed, but, you know.
NOI stuff.
Yeah, rolling with me everywhere I went, alhamdulillah. So after that, for 9th grade year, I told my dad I wanted to go to Islamic school, right? So I went online, found Al-Azhar Islamic Academy. We went there, signed up, and then for my 10th, 11th, 12th grade year, I attended Al-Azhar. So I was like, okay, when I finish here, I'm gonna go to Medina. So after I graduated, I went to Medina, and somewhere along in my journey, my father called me back and was like, you know what? It would be better if you come home and go to college, and then afterwards you can go back because you're so young and impressionable. If you stay there at this moment, I'm afraid you may come home with a mind that's not yours. You know, so
that's a profound insight, man, from your pops, because we've also seen that, man. Like, we've seen, and I'm curious, like, before you get ahead of that, like, Philly is, like, notoriously the, like, heart of Salafi America, right?
Yeah.
But just Islam, too, is super present there. Like, you walk around, and it's just dudes walking around in thobes, and, you know, women in, like, abayas, and big beards everywhere. You know, you go to, like, the barbershop, and you're just like, give me the Sunni. And they, like, hook you up with the nice beard, right? So, like, what is that? And, like, it's such a unique experience that's really not that common in other places in America, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? Like, what's it like in that?
I tell you, I take another level. Like, there's some barbershops you go to, the barber won't cut your beard because he says haram. I've been there. You know, he won't. You can't pay.
Bro, how are you in business? You just refuse.
You know, he won't cut the Muslim brother's beard, but then he'll turn around and he'll, you know, line a sister's eyebrows up. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's a wild. Philly's a wild city like that. It's a wild dichotomy. But, you know, we do have an ingrained Muslim culture such that you'll be hard pressed to find a single family where there isn't a Muslim in it, in the inner city. So there's Muslims everywhere. You know, even the vernacular of the Muslims, you find that non-Muslims have taken it on.
Right.
You know, they'll tell you, like, I remember I had a non-Muslim girl came up to me and she was like, yo, this is haram. You can't do that. I said, what are you talking about? You're Muslim? She said, no. But my boyfriend told me, you know, my Muslim boyfriend told me this is haram. Yes. I said, okay, I'm not going to touch that. But, you know, that's
your
just...
Muslim boyfriend.
Yeah, right.
Well, let me tell you about your Muslim
boyfriend.
Exactly.
But that's the culture in Philly, man. So the vernacular, the way people dress, a lot of the sunnah is normal, commonplace, familiar to see a Muslim sister in the police force, to see Muslim politicians, to see Muslims in big economic positions as well. So I grew up not ever feeling shy of my Islam. You know, it was nothing to wear izars and jalabiyas. I remember back in the day we were wearing them, and, you know, it was normal to see sisters in niqab working at the airport, like, you know, which is ajib in other places.
And we're talking about predominantly African American,
Precisely,
not immigrant,
no,
convert.
Yeah, African American.
Yeah, and so is this specific neighborhoods? Is it around specific, like, mosques or communities or, like, imams, or is it just, like, widespread?
It's throughout the whole entire Philly. One thing, and things are changing a bit now because of the younger generation, but I remember growing up, you could walk in any neighborhood, in the worst neighborhoods, and you could have a thobe on, a kufi on, and you're good. Yeah. That was like a pass. Yeah. Things are changing now, different, man. If a sister had hijab on, she could walk in any neighborhood. Anyway. Nobody would say anything to her or bother her. You know, it was just an understanding. Even the worst guys, man, they knew, like, we don't fool with the Muslims. Like, that was just a thing.
I mean, I think there was in that generation that we grew up in, like you said, it is changing. But I'm sure Philly's like an, you know, especially intense version of that. But you find that everywhere, man. You found that in Oakland. You find that anywhere where, you know, it is a black neighborhood, you found this reverence for Islam, right?
Sure.
And, like, one of the most amazing stories of that is there's this brother, Abdul Qadir Wiswa, who's from New Jersey. It's, like, right outside of Princeton. It's, like, super hood. I forget this. There's a city right outside of New Jersey. Right outside of Princeton, New Jersey. But it's like super hood. It's like 20 minutes away. Anyway, I visited him a couple times there. Maybe it'll come to me.
Not Trenton.
Yeah, Trenton.
It's Trenton. Brick City.
Yeah, Trenton. So basically, what he told me, because he has a coffee shop there and he's been there. He's a white convert, by the way. Mm-hmm. So he, one time, and he's like into like his bicycle. So one time he was riding his bike through like a specific neighborhood and he got a flat tire. Mm-hmm. So he was like, man, I need to fix my flat tire. So he had to go to the ATM just to get like some money to go fix his tire, right? Mm-hmm. So he said he literally was like in a real rough area, and he goes to this ATM, and he knew he was like in a rough area because above the ATM there was a sign that just said, "Use this ATM at your own risk."
Dang.
So he was like,
yeah, he embraced it.
So he was like, all right. So he only took out like $40 or something. Like he was just what he needed.
He'll take that too,
right? So then he's walking. And he feels like somebody following him. Mm-hmm. You know, he could just feel that vibe, right? Somebody's after him. So he's like, man, what am I about to do? You know, and so he pulls out his phone, just kind of like instinctually, like he's about to call somebody. Mm-hmm. And he puts his phone to his ear, and somebody just, bam, like hits him in the side of his head, right where his phone is, and his phone like kind of goes flying, right? And he just turns around and it's like basically a whole crew of dudes.
Dang.
And the dude that hit him is like shirt off, tatted up.
Ready to
like,
go.
Just ready. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he turns around and, you know, he's like a middle-aged white dude at this point. I mean, at that point, he's probably in his like late 30s or something. And he said, just instinctually, without thinking, he's like, to this day, I don't know why I said this. He just looks at him, he goes, what are you doing? I'm Muslim.
Dang.
And he said, the dude looks at him and he goes, you're Muslim? And he said, yeah. And this dude reaches down, picks up his phone, puts it in his hand and says, my bad.
Straight
and walks
like that,
away.
Man. I got chills, man. That's it, man.
And like, you know, we can think of a number of stories like that, but that is the most like profound story to illustrate like the reverence that Islam holds in black communities, and it's because of the nation, straight up. It's because of Malcolm. It's because of Elijah Muhammad. It's because of Muhammad Ali. It's because like of the value add that it brought to the community. And he also mentioned like in Trenton, his wife is actually, he married I think his wife is like Bengali or something like that. And wears hijab and the whole thing. And he mentioned that like when she's walking down the street at night, like the dudes selling drugs on the corner, they'll literally cross the street when she's coming because she's wearing a hijab. So it's like that. Even dudes that are selling drugs. And so, but again, the brother Abdul Qadir, he also mentioned, he said that was 10 years ago when that happened. And he said now it's changing.
Yeah, it's changing.
And I'm curious the reasons why, but one of the reasons that he was reflecting on is he said, honestly, he goes, a lot of it, like we think like even in the hood, like the news and all this like ISIS and 9/11 might not trickle down, but he said a lot of it does, and like in their perception has shifted to see that like Muslims aren't like, they're just messed up like everybody else. Yeah. They're bombing, suicide bombing, whatever. You know what I mean? In the popular perception. So I'm just curious. What you think, and has it also changed in Philly like that?
I would say in the city, when people are watching the news and things of this nature, they don't really sort of tie that into African, or black Muslims. You know, they see as other, like Arabs, Pakistanis, and Indonesian Pakistanis. That's the other people that are bombing terrorists. Like, but when they look at black Muslims, they don't equate them to that. But what they do equate them to is when they see Muslims, you're Muslim and you're selling drugs, you're Muslim, you're robbing banks, you're Muslim and you're doing these things, then they lose respect for Muslims. You know, like for example, there was a shooting in Philadelphia that happened this last week where 6 police officers were shot. Right? Come to find out who did it, a Muslim. Right? And I saw there was an article written up on the internet, and it talked about how he was going to a Salafi masjid. And then they did research on the Salafi ideology, all this other stuff. But it was these are non-Muslims that were connecting the dots. Like we wouldn't even go that far, but they said perhaps this could be connected to this and all of this nature. It was one of those websites that they get off on talking about how Muslims are extreme. So they really stretched it, but people are reading those materials. And also it talked about, it mentioned there was a group of Muslims that weren't from that movement or from another movement from like the Imam Jamil community, and they had a flyer where they were going up against the police, like stopping terrorist, racist police, you know. So if they equate Muslims to like this trouble and drama and shooting police officers and stuff like that, they're like, what makes you guys different from us? Before there was a reverence because they said, yo, Muslims don't do this. They're respectful people, so we have to treat them with certain respect. And also there's a fear of Muslims as well. You know, like we don't want them to retaliate, but they came from unity.
Right.
You know,
they're well organized, they're disciplined,
exactly.
but they don't play around.
Exactly.
Right.
But if the unity is broken and you see Muslim men disrespecting their own women and disrespecting themselves, it's open season. You know, so all around the board, that's our issue. You know, there's not a united front. Like, you know, we can't even celebrate Eid together. Right. So, yeah, so that's an issue.
And so what was it just that like a number of, in the 90s, a number of people, like brothers from Philly studied in Medina and then came back and kind of that, like how did the Salafi thing really spread in Philly like that?
Yeah, the brothers from Philadelphia have been traveling since the early, talking about 70s, 80s, going to Medina, going to Egypt, coming to the journey that we're on right now. Brothers have done it before years ago. So you have these brothers that even went to Yemen that came and studied. But a lot of them were half-baked, though. You know, they came, did a little bit of Arabic and went back. Did a little bit of this and went back. Came a little bit, so it came back.
Because they had a little bit of Arabic, which is a lot more than everybody else.
Of course,
of course, shape, right?
Yeah, you became the go-to guy, and also too, the Salafi movement was very, very enticing, because for years you have these people, these foreigners that were coming and not giving you, they will give you a little bit of what they want you to understand in their books or whatever, but don't give you access to the Quran, access to the Arabic language. So here come these guys, we're going to give you Quran and Sunnah, forget these scholars, forget the madhab, forget everything.
Forget somebody else's culture.
That's it. Forget the culture, we're going to give you straight Quran and Sunnah. We were like, you know, and then also it was like almost cultish, and it was like I get down or lay down, are they with me or you're not? So a lot of us who came from the gang mentality is like, okay, I recognize this. Now we're down for Islam. Like, these are my brothers. We will hang out together. We eat together. We don't hang with those people.
Blood in, blood out.
Blood in, blood out type of thing. So it was, it was very enticing. And there are, like, in terms of my studiousness, I got that from hanging around those brothers. They were very studious, always into books. Right. The whole culture was surrounded around lectures, around seeking knowledge. That's all it was about. So I got my yearning for seeking knowledge from hanging with those brothers. Alhamdulillah, so I give them credit for that. Even their loyalty to the scholars to a certain degree, giving reverence to scholarship, albeit not always the right scholarship, but nevertheless, they did have a reverence for scholars.
And like culturally, you have so many artists that are, Muslims from that. I mean,
no doubt.
You have like, Black Thought from the Roots. You have Freeway, Beanie Siegel's from Philly,
right? Tone Trump.
Tone Trump. You have a bunch of, I'm sure you could probably list a lot more.
Yeah.
That are like very visible and very representatives of that.
No doubt.
That tradition.
No doubt.
And really beloved like artists. You know what I mean?
Remember what Jay-Z said in the song? I had to kill witnesses because Free Bear is sticking out. So that was a little, a little nods up to the Philadelphia brothers, man, that always have their beer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, mashallah. So now you're studying at al-Azhar, and like, what is that like, bro? And what is it like being from Philly and studying at al-Azhar?
A lot of times for me it's surreal, man. Like I wake up in the morning and I can't believe like this is my life, just here studying, speaking Arabic language. Sometimes I even have dreams in Arabic now because just by being in it so much. And it's something I'm really grateful for because I know that it's by invitation. Allah doesn't invite everybody on the path, But it's difficult. It has a lot of difficulties. A lot of people, they romanticize studying in the Arab world, but it's not sweet at all. Actually, eventually, if we could replicate these systems in the West, I think it would be better. Because a lot of students don't make it, man. You find a lot of people. Every year, you see people come by the dozens. And maybe out of 12 students that come, 9 will leave. And, a few will make it. Or a few will just come for a few months and then leave. And like we said, half-baked. So the process is difficult. just dealing with bureaucracy, paperwork, this organization, it's difficult. But the fruit of it is, I remember standing in prayer one day, and I understood what was being said, from the Quran, that really affected my heart. So things like that, you have these moments of victory that keep you going, but, the path is difficult.
Yeah, man, and you're also, you have a unique thing, right? Because you've also, even before you went to study overseas, you had been like an imam or assistant imam.
Yeah.
And also you're an artist, so, maybe you could share a little bit about that aspect of your journey and, how you think that relates to your,
Yeah, so one thing I have to say, I love Philadelphia because the city put me on their back, from growing up, from the time I really started performing officially from 18, I was doing slam poetry, and I got featured on HBO's Brave New Voices, and put in the newspapers and around the city, and I was featuring them. At 18, I then did CNN, Who's Black in America. So I was having the time of my life. At 18, on a big scale as an artist. And I remember there was an Imam, Shadid Muhammad, from South Philly, who he called me into his office one time, and I knew I was in trouble, man. Because nobody ever calls you.
His name's Shadid.
Shadid, right? Nobody ever calls you into the Imam's office you're doing a great job, right? It's always to tell you what you did. So I was shook. I really didn't want to go. But then I remembered, one of my mentors is there, and he called me to the office, and he was talking to me about doing Jummah and stuff like that, and about how there was a need for a youth presence in the masajid and stuff like that. So I'm thinking where's this conversation going? So he asked me, could I do the khutbah? And I was like, that's not my lane. It's impossible. There's no way on earth I'm going to do it. I can't even do it. I never did it before. I never had an interest. But he said, are you able to read and write Arabic? I said, yes. He said, could you speak Arabic? I said, yes. To the little degree that I could at that time. He said, okay, I want you to prepare a khutbah, something new, something fresh, not, something, just give me a new concept, and then bring it in, we'll talk about it. So what I did was, at the time, it was Drake's song, I was out, YOLO, right? So I don't know what influenced me to come up with this concept, YOLO, because you only live once, and what are the implications of that if you think that there's no hayat dunya. So I brought him the concept, and he told me that there was a group of people called the Hiriyun who believed, and during the time of Prophet ﷺ, that they say there's nothing else after hayat dunya. And they would ask Allah, do you think after we are dust and bones that you're going to bring us back? Right. So he said the concepts are the same. Shaitan just repeats them over in different manners. So we took that, expounded upon it, and I ended up having a whole piece of writing. I was just, so interested pulling up tafsir and stuff like that. And then one day, on a Wednesday, he called me. He's like, listen, I'm traveling on Thursday. There's nobody to do the khutbah. If you don't do it, it's not going to be done. Bang, hung up. Right, I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So I'm bugging out. So finally, come Friday, I came. I remember I was supposed to be there 1:15. I came here late just to see if somebody else would get up there and do it, right? And I walk into the masjid, and I hear one of the Arab brothers from Maghrib speaking Arabic on the microphone. So I was like, yes, somebody's doing the khutbah, but he was giving announcements, So alhamdulillah, I got up there shaking and all, but I did the khutbah, and it was amazing, mashallah, alhamdulillah. People really appreciated it. It resonated. It brought the youth out. They were talking about it, and then from there, the news spread around the city, and I ended up for 3 years straight doing Jummah every single Friday, almost. And
you were still a teenager at that time?
Still, yeah, in my teens, man. I go early 20s in my teens, So thanks to Imam Shadid, who challenged me, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, that I began to hone in on, my skills of Arabic speaking, studying Quran and stuff like that even more. But what that did for me was, at the time, spiritually, my maturity, mentally, I wasn't ready. Because now I'm at a level where you're a khatib. What comes along with being a khatib? What are responsibilities in the public and in private? I never heard of tasawwuf at the time, nothing like that, spiritual refinement, anything. So I'm just a young kid, fresh off the street, Now you're a khatib. Now, in our community, you brother imam now, right? So now
everybody's coming for advice.
Right. What's the fiqh of this? Is this halal? Is haram? And I had no knowledge of, no madhab, anything. So I found myself in a position where you know, may Allah forgive me. Sometimes I would answer questions without proper knowledge, you know, just to save face. You know, so I got to a certain point where I was like, I need to get out of this situation. So Imam Farid, another one of our beloved Imams, he was here in Egypt, and he called me to do a khutbah in Chester. He was like, I won't be able to make it. Can you cover my Jummah? I said, sure, I could cover it, but what are you doing that you won't make it? He said, I'm here in Egypt looking after my students. And I was like, well, I want to study too. He said, if you're serious, forget the khutbah, stop what you're doing and come right now. I was like, right now? He said, right now. So I hung up the phone, talked to my parents, and next thing you know, I was on the next thing smoking in Egypt. Got here, left my bags, and that's where it all began 3 years ago.
No, that's deep, man, and I feel you, bro. It's like, you know, I've thought about this a lot because, you know, a lot of we all know, like, our friends are like the kind of like, you know, younger generation of imams in their like 30s and 40s now, right? Yeah. So we know all of them, you know what I mean? And like, it's deep because like, people have asked me to give khutbahs all the time, and I was like, always like, nah, dude. To give a khutbah is so official. Like, you're an imam.
It's serious, though, bro.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what it is, if it's just because, like, when you convert to Islam, you see the one giving the khutbah, like,
that's it, right?
So I'm happy to, like, give a talk about Islam or whatever, but I was always like, I'm doing it as an artist, sharing my perspective.
That's it.
You know what I mean? Like, there was, like, a protection from being put on that pedestal, because it's like, and if the first time, like, now I've given a couple of khutbahs, but the first time I ever did was in London, actually. And I was with your boys. I was with Muhammad Yahya, Mustafa Briggs, and I think Khalid Siddiq, or maybe his brother was there that day, not him. We went to Rumi's cave, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You dropped it on him?
And look, man, we just went but then the khatib didn't show up.
No,
so all those brothers were like, you give it. And I was like, no, I'm straight. But then they were like, if you don't give it, we're not gonna have Jummah.
SubhanAllah.
So I just like riffed. I'm not even sure if it was like valid, but I just like it is, and it was cool. I'm happy I had it there because that's like a real art space. It's a beautiful space, and but there's some to it. And then recently I gave a khutbah in Seattle at this spot called the Islamic House, which is in the University District right by the University of Washington. So it's mostly like young people, students, and people from that neighborhood. And honestly, bro, what the brothers started like really pushing me to do it because like there was just some khutbahs that I went to in the Seattle area that were just like not even not good, but just like actually like harmful. It was just like so. And the thing about like Islam in America that's really interesting is like, there's such a mixed bag. It's so many different, you know what I mean? Like you said, as far as perspectives, there's not really like authority in the sense, which is on some level good in that like, you know, I mean, here in Egypt and like in Jordan and a lot of Muslim countries, like the government gives there's government appointed khatibs, and if they step out of line, they're fired. And they're given the night before, they're told, or the week before, this is the khutbah you're going to give this week. Here's the verses of the Quran, here's the hadith. And like, you don't have a choice. Something beautiful in that, like, you know, in America, like, they really will let you be as long as they're not worried about you doing like any type of like, you know, violent rebellion. Like, they'll just let you be, you know what I mean? For the most part. But, so there is a freedom in that, but it's also, like you say, man, anyone could just be up there, you know? This week it's like the computer programmer. This week it's like the doctor. This week it's the shopkeeper. Like, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, I feel you, bro. And it's interesting, like, there's also just different, you know, minhages. There's different schools of thought on, you know, authority. But, yeah, man, what is your, like, what have you gained just from being in an environment like al-Azhar, which is this, like, ancient institution of learning? I mean, for those that don't know, it's like the oldest continuous university. Yeah. And it's like a center of, you know, Islamic learning in the Sunni world. It's like one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious institution. Even though it's changed a lot, people are more like, will say it's not what it used to be and things like that.
which is true.
But yeah, what's your experience?
A few things I've taken. One is that al-Azhar has expanded my mind. It's very unique in the sense that Azhar studies like all the madahib, and they all study in like a unique way. Where the traditional Azhar, there used to be a rawaq, which is like four corners, and in each corner there would be the four madahibs, and the Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali, Hanafi. They would all get together and they would like debate and talk, but it was on like it was like fraternity, you know. Right. There wasn't like, you know, when our eldest Baba Sharif, he said that he thought that it was like almost like a gang type of thing. Right. Like, I don't get down with the Malikis, Malikis don't get the Shafis. You know, it's so, you know, conflicting, but it's really not. Learned people, there's never that kind of conflict. There's always the general or awam people that make it seem like it's conflicting. When in actuality, they were brothers, they were students of each other. And even Abu Hanifa was sending his students, Abu Yusuf, to Imam Malik, and Imam Shafi was the student of Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was the student of Imam Shafi. So that's the beauty of it. So one thing I learned was that expanding my mind. In the Azhar, you learn even different. You have Shafi fiqh. The Shia, the fiqh of the Shia, and the different movements that you learn about their history, and it gives it to you in a real way, where it's not like a biased way. The discussions, there's discourse between the Shia scholars and the scholars of al-Azhar, where they debated certain subjects and they came to different understandings, the different types of aqidah, the Athari, Ash'ari, Maturidi. You know, so you learn different things. When other places, they give you one box way of thinking, and if you think outside of this box, you're off, you're gone. But Azhar expands your mind. So a lot of the things that I've been doing in the past years is a lot of unlearning the things that I learned and I thought I knew before. I remember so many times I was given concepts that was just so hard for me to grasp. My father came and visited like a few months ago, and I remember I was leading the prayer for Fajr, and he saw me praying with my hands at my sides. And I haven't seen my father, you know, living with him for a long time, so this blew his mind. Like, it troubled his whole prayer. Like, so as soon as we got home, sit down, I need to talk to you, right? Like, what you learned in the Azhar, you know, so he started going on, right? Then on top of that, I took him to Hadra with the Ja'faris. Like, he's like, yo, like, my son is bugging out. Like, what does he learn in Azhar? But, and even though my father...
Hadra, do they do movement or they just...
It wasn't even movement. It was just
like... dhikr, basically.
Just dhikr, you know? But that's foreign to us, though, you know? So... because of the influence of that particular movement, everything that isn't what you know, then it must be wrong. And that's the type of mentality that came here. So I had to unlearn a lot of things. But to get back to your question, one, I learned appreciation for the madahib, for the schools of thoughts, to learn Islam in an organized, systematic way. Appreciation of scholarship, Turath, you know, the books or whatever, lineage, connection back to the Prophet ﷺ, silsila. I really learned about that, and I have appreciation of that. Emphasis on aqidah. Before, like, you know, when we talked about aqidah, the only thing I knew was from the Salafi movement. Like, this is our aqidah, that you respect the president, you know, the king of Saudi Arabia. If you don't, your aqidah is jacked up, right? You know, you hang with these people at these masajid, or else your aqidah is jacked up. You wear these clothes, or else your aqidah. That was our, you know, that was our understanding of aqidah. So when I came here, I understood the true principles, which is understanding who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was, and how scholars differed, and was still under the umbrella of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you know? The third thing I learned about was tasawwuf. You know, in Philly, Sufi was a dirty word. I remember that was on our, you know, imams, and unfortunately, to this day, he stopped, like, unfriended me in real life, like, you know, like, and I understand why, but I was so young in my age, I didn't, you know, I don't think I was to blame, but he was the imam at this masjid, and he got kicked out because he mentioned in the khutbah Sufism, Dr. Jackson's book, Sufism for the non-Sufi. Wow. They kicked him out, the new imam kicked him out the masjid. Kicked him out just for mentioning it, right? And that was my guy, but I didn't defend him, right? I was like, no, you're a Sufi. Like, you shouldn't have said that. Right, you shouldn't have said that. But I liked him, though. So later on in life, like, when I realized what was going on, I tried to reconnect, but he was like, yo, I'm done with you, you know? But that goes to the extent that just mentioning it was like not only a dirty word, but you were like, we would discommunicate ourselves from you if you mention that. Sure. Many times, I remember the influence was so deep, I would go and visit a friend's house, and if I would see a book that had Sufism, and I would look at them sideways. I remember I had a friend like this. My friend Sammy, my brother Bashir. I remember having a conversation with him because Bashir was doing dhikr with his dhikr beads. Yo, that's bid'ah, man. My dad had some dhikr beads. I remember popping them, man. Like, you know, I was on that wave, bro. So, and when I look back, I remember crying, actually living in Egypt, crying, thinking that, subhanallah, here I've born and raised Muslim, and I've never tasted the sweetness of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, never made dhikr outside of after salat. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, you know, Allahu Akbar, that's it. Never dhikr. Never send salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Never had a love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, let alone Ahlul Bayt. My whole life as a Muslim, I'm talking about 20-something years, never doing that because of a movement, you know? Never having a love for the awliya, nothing. So I remember it really brought me to tears, man, when I realized like the effects of that particular movement. Not having I remember being so ignorant, man. A brother, you know, he was talking about madhabs, and he was like, you know, what madhab do you follow? And I was like, I don't follow madhab. We don't follow madhabs, you know, we don't follow these men. And I'm just parroting what I heard from other people, right? He said, so where do you take your fiqh from? And at the time, I didn't even know what fiqh was, bro. Like, you know? So years back, I had to look back. That was so ignorant. Like, just parroting, not knowing what I was saying. Like, where do you take your fiqh from? You know, so I take it from the hadith. So do you open up a book of hadith and just extrapolate evidence on your own, which a lot of people are doing? This is the destruction of the religion. You know, people just coming up with their own opinions. So I've taken so much from being here. A lot of unlearning and then relearning. But, you know, my intention in coming was I'm going to come here, I'm going to teach my community when I go back. But really, I learned that Allah brought me here to remove ignorance from myself first. You know? So the priority is really self. And if Allah gives me an opening to benefit others, then alhamdulillah. But if not, just removing ignorance from myself and from my family is sufficient enough at this point.
Yeah. And that will make you a teacher. Like, no, you know. Hey, I really like what you're saying, and I think... for all times, but I think especially for our time, and especially in our Western context, like, you know, you have so many people who, like you say, they've just been taught this is Islam.
Yeah, that's it.
And it goes from different, bro, it's like there's Sufi people that have been taught from the Sufi perspective, like this is all that Islam is, right? And they don't really know about other vantage points or other ways of looking at it. There's so much misunderstanding, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so like just bringing up the general literacy and say like, hey, this is a perspective. This is a perspective. This is the historical development of this school and that school. So this is the vantage point. And then even being like, this is the vantage point or the school that I'm teaching from. Yeah. And being able to have that like, you know, like intellectual honesty and intellectual humility to just be like, and it's like, we were talking about this the other day, it's like, you know, it's unreasonable to believe that the whole ummah is going to agree on anything.
Of course.
It's just not going to happen.
Of course.
It didn't happen amongst the Sahaba, so who do you think you are? Yeah. Like, it didn't happen amongst the Salaf. So, if we're Salafis, and the thing about not just the Salafi, but like every group claims to be on the way of the Salaf. Like even whatever you call yourself, you claim to be on the way of the Salaf. And so if you claim to be upon the way of the Salaf, then you understand that the Salaf had great ikhtilaf. They did. They had great different opinions. They did. So then to be on the way of the Salaf is to have great difference of opinion. And to, you know, then if we accept that that's just the way it's going to be, then the next step is like, okay, so how is the best way to navigate great difference of opinion? Sure. And it's like through conversation, through being real, through like reaching across differences and being like, yeah, I know where you stand and I differ from you on this and this, but we agree on this and this. All right. Yeah. And it's so interesting that like in many ways it's easier to have like inter-religious dialogue than intra-religious dialogue, i.e. with other religions, it's easier to like talk. But with people that differ from you within your own tradition, it can be difficult. But I hope like people are becoming, it seems to me, from our generation, people are becoming more open. And I just think like when I was in Dallas I think earlier this year, maybe last year, and I was having dinner with Omar Suleiman and a number of the other brothers there, yeah. And I remember it was funny. We were all talking, and we all came from different perspectives and with different teachers. But I remember one of the elders, like real kind of like uncle status, and he was like, "How can you work with people that have differences of opinion from you?" Like he was like coming from that perspective, and it was funny because like all of us that were from the younger generation, we were all like, "No, alhamdulillah, we're gonna differ." He wasn't even talking about anyone in the room. He was just talking in general, and he didn't necessarily even know that people in this room come from very different perspectives. Precisely, yeah. But we're all coming together to say like, "Yeah, you're my brother," and like we're work for khair. Yeah. And so it was interesting to see all of us like, you know, all of those brothers in that room like having deference for this elder, but also being like, but no, like we like that's not how we're gonna operate. And I hope that is a generational thing. Like it seems like amongst our generation, like people aren't really as caught up. Yeah, for sure.
Well, what I do see with that, along with that, is that this idea of openness, everyone is more opinionated now, and also distrusting of the scholars because of what had happened before, like dogmatic thinking leading to such creating differences within the community, and sort of creating conflict. People are distrusting the scholarship now, saying we're going to think for ourselves. So now they're dogging out the scholars, and now people are creating their own opinions as well. So
that's a good point, man. That's a real thing. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we do see that for our generation, like you looked up to the scholars, like anyone who's teaching or who's like you wanted to, like you say, sit at their feet. You wanted, they have the Arabic, they have knowledge, and it's like there was a great deference from that. And now with the kind of 20-somethings, right? There's been a radical shift in like very little time in general. And this is my own like working through it. I haven't really thought. I need to think about it more, and I'll acknowledge that. So I'm curious, like how you think about this. But it seems like the reverence and like the honor has shifted towards the activists.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And so like those that are really doing the activism work, those are the ones that are invited to speak. Those are the ones you want to sit at their feet. Those are the ones that you celebrate. Those are the actually like the voices in the community that have shine, and also that get the bigger honorariums, and that like the are representing the community, whether or not they've studied or whatever. And even those imams or those scholars that are respected, they're respected because they're activists. Exactly, yeah. Right? So Omar Suleiman, who we mentioned, and I like him a lot, I respect, he's sincerely like, marching for, Black Lives Matter and for immigration and he, all these things, fundraisers for people, Yemen, Syria, like he's really about that. And what's interesting is like, it's like for that generation, that is his validation to listen to him speak about it. For sure. It's not because he studied this or he knows this. It's like, because you're doing that, now I'll listen to your Islam. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I'm curious what your thoughts on all this.
I think that it comes as a result of, all these years having imams on hop on the minbar on a Friday and you're talking about, not to say that it doesn't have a significance, but you're talking about the different names of Jannah, right? When people are, Jannah has 99 names and people are out there being slaughtered, killed right in your neighborhood. You have gun problems, you have drugs problems, you have prostitution, you have mass incarceration. But every Friday you're talking about the 99 names of paradise. You're talking about, these things that are out there like abstract when you have real problems. So when somebody steps up and they're, creating solutions to these problems, like the respect then shifts. And also it is from our tradition to be activists. The Prophet ﷺ was an activist. He saw things going on in his community and changed them hands-on. So if you're just preaching the book and there's no fruit, there's no result of what you're preaching, it then loses its value.
And it's not seen as like relating to the lived experience of the people.
And that's it. Right. But the activists are speaking to lived experience. And sometimes they're quoting these ayahs and these evidences or whatever, but you can see them walking with what they're saying. Right. You know, sometimes it gets blurry for them as well, but at least you see them doing something. So I think there should be a marriage of the two. You know, there's a place for the scholarship and there's a place for the activism, and where the two can meet and learn from each other and benefit each other, that's important as well. But, you know, for every imam to get out there and have to be an activist, I don't think it's necessary. There's a place for, you know, certain imams don't need to be out there, you know, but they should be aware of what's going on, the verbiage, what's happening. They should be in assistance, and they shouldn't be speaking against, you know, or getting up on the minbar to condemn people or being judgmental. What you see out of defensiveness, it happens, and the activists shouldn't be, you know, canceling all the scholars as well.
Yeah, and this ties into this. I mean, I've thought about this, like, if you think about, like, 20-somethings growing up, right? They're growing up post 9/11, like, they don't remember before 9/11.
Sure.
Right? And also, like, you know, so then, and you're, like, growing up in, like, Trump's America, basically. And so from the right, there's, like, these demonized groups, right? Which basically is like a list. The short list is like immigrants, black people, homosexuals, Muslims, and maybe you could add a few other, you know what I mean? But basically, like, Muslims are one of those lists.
Yeah, sure.
So I think what you see, I think, from a lot of people is, like, just on the, like, I'm thinking about this, that if you grow up kind of as one, like, and your whole life, this one group is, like, attacking you, and you see the politicians and the president and all these people, like, you don't belong here. And then there's another group on the left that are like, we're riding for those select groups and we're defending them. You're like, oh, those are my people. Like, and I'm, right? So it's almost like, you know, because we talk about how, like, there's kind of levels of Islam. And one of the levels of Islam is just, like, pure identity. Like, I'm a Muslim. That's my identity. And that's not bad, obviously, but it's also, it can be extremely superficial. Like, it's just, like, because it's, like, you know, I mean, I think Islam is supposed to do something to you, right? As the Prophet ﷺ articulated it, it's like it's a method. It's actually right. You know, it is the hadith nawafil, you know, that you know draw near by the obligatory, and then continue to draw near by the supererogatory until I love him, until I love them, and when I love them, I become the eye with which they hear. You know, the eye with which they see, the ear with which they hear. And so, like, it's something to do something to you. It's not just like, I'm Muslim, whatever.
And that's it. Yeah.
And I can say whatever and be whatever. Like, my Islam says this. But people that are on that, like, they are the targeted identity group. In the sense, like, these right-wing people have said, like, no, it doesn't matter what you believe. If you're Muslim, like that. So, you know what I mean? It's kind of like a response to that, in a sense. And, you know, and then I see these, like, interesting ways that, like, the Muslim community is being, like, tossed into the kind of, like, culture wars, and like America's becoming more and more polarized, right? Sure. Left and right. And, like, there's some Muslims that are just, like, straight up leftist, liberal, boom, put an Islam sticker on that, that's what we're on. That's
it, yeah.
And then there's, on the other side, there's all these Muslims that are just on some, like, basically taking, like, the whole, like, right-wing Christian talking points and, like, putting an Islamic label on them, and, like, and it's just like, bruh, I'm not with any of that.
Exactly.
Like, why do you have to? Like, Islam, you know, supersedes all that.
Yeah.
Like, Islam is its own vantage point. And within that, there's a breadth of like we said, there's diverse range of opinions and perspectives and schools of thought. But, like, I just feel like it's super I do see this polarization that because if you grow up in America, you're going to fall into one of these camps. Sure. That's your lived reality, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And it's like Islam, to me, it articulates a vantage point that transcends those. Yeah, sure. It transcends the either or. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you haven't learned, if you aren't studied in those things, you're just going to take what's available to you, you know, mm-hmm. what you see is present. So I think that's the significance of knowledge, you know.
No. But yeah, man. So, but also you're performing all over. Like you're doing these gigs, and you're making suits. So we should get to that too. You're a designer.
Yeah.
So,
fresh.
But so yeah, man. What's like you're traveling all over. You're going whatever. Tomorrow you're going to Canada to do something. Like, what are the type of events you do? What type of performances are you doing? Who do you find is your demographic that's drawn to what you're doing? Yeah, man.
I think, but before I left, I was like, you know, on the circuit doing like spoken word performances, like, you know, internationally and nationally as well. But moving to Egypt, things got really quiet because I don't think people were trying to pay the ticket to go from Egypt all the way back to the States. Mm-hmm. So, you know, things got really quiet. But in terms of performances, I've been out of like the performance circuit for a minute, except for those few organizations that called. Like we just did a tour, Beyond the Bilal tour, me and Mustafa Briggs, and we did I think like 17 cities. It was really successful, alhamdulillah, and that was like I think the best touring experience I ever had in my life. You know, it was beautiful, and like some doors opened up that haven't opened up before. So we did that, and on that tour I was doing poetry for my book entitled "Woke and Wake of the White Awakening," which I wrote here in Egypt. So it was speaking to like mostly Muslim audiences, but there were some non-Muslim audiences as well. And I was just talking about my experiences in Egypt as a student of knowledge, going through spiritual transformation. I spoke about black identity, trying to find my, black identity within the framework of al-Islam, feeling sometimes that my culture was always stigmatized as haram, everything, the way I dressed, the way I spoke, the way I talked, growing up feeling that way. So I just talked about these different concepts within the concept of Beyond Bilal, which my brother Mustafa Briggs presented. But now mostly I find people more willing to book me for speaking engagements as well. So I'm giving like Islamic lectures and talks at Muslim Fest this coming week. I'll be giving a discourse entitled I forgot the discourse already. Talk the toxic religiosity. So talking about how young people or Muslims in general are being pushed away from Islam because these hyper religious people that present Islam as this stern, rigid type of religion where there's no forgiveness, either hellfire or or bid'ah, and these different terminologies that are pushing people outside of Islam. People are becoming judge and jury, condemning people to the hellfire and things of this nature, or just having them do these rigorous acts without any understanding of it, of what's the sweetness of prayer, what's the sweetness of ibadah. So I want to talk about that and break that down to a simple framework using examples of the Prophet ﷺ. How did he deal with people that had spiritual sicknesses, at such a lofty level of iman where the Prophet ﷺ would tell people to abstain from things that he himself didn't do, So imagine you are leadership and people are doing things. You have such a high spiritual level where somebody will come to you and say, I want to commit zina. We have people, who you come to an imam today talking like that and you're done. Like you may never be invited. You may be kicked out of the masjid. But our Prophet, the messenger of God, was able to sit and have a talk with a young person that wanted to do such thing and reason with him on a human level. You'll be hard pressed to find people like that. We have some leaders now that are like that, but for the most part, if that was his parents, that was his peers a lot of times, his local masjid, it would be over. Imagine going like to a local masjid, like a blunt fell out your pocket or something like that. You're done. You're finished. Going to a local masjid, you want to have a gender transformation or something like that. There's no spaces where you can have these conversations because of toxic religiosity. People are so religious and so godly that that's beneath them. You know, leaving off the human reality. Like, yo, like we are human beings that have sicknesses. So I remember a saying that said that the masjid is not supposed to be a club for the righteous. You know, it's supposed to be a hospital for the sick. You know, but we have this religious social clubs where everybody knows exactly how to talk. The verbiage to say, everybody dresses the same. Everybody puts on this performative Islam, as Dr. J says, as opposed to addressing real life issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. It's like false religiosity because it's like it doesn't allow, like you say, like the real, really sanctified people, really transformed people, really Muhammadan people, people upon the Sunnah, they don't have that quality.
They don't.
They're just not. It's absent. Like they're actually the least judgmental and the most compassionate and the most forgiving and overlooking of faults, you know, and like gentle with people. You know, and I was just thinking about that because, like, you know, just that whole piece of like telling people you should do this, you should do that, without like establishing first like any knowledge of them. Yeah, sure. Or like where they're at, or what they've experienced, or like who they are, or what they know, or what they love, or what pain they experience. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like, you know, it's a profound actually lack of understanding the prophetic way. Yeah, sure. You know, even just the other day, I was like went in the masjid, and like afterwards, the brother like clearly there was somebody watching me while I was praying, and like you know at the side of your eye you could feel like, and so then like afterwards he's like, come here, and I was like, I had a call to do, so I like didn't really want to, and also just vibe wise, I was like, I know where this is about to go. Yeah, I'm not really feeling whatever you want to tell me. I have a feeling I'm not gonna feel this conversation. So then I come over, shake his hand, and then he pulls me like sit. And so then I was like, just energetically, like I'm super sensitive. I was like, I'm not really into whatever, and I like literally have to do a call. But then I was like, real split second, I was like, okay, like what would the Prophet ﷺ do? Okay, so I was like, hold on. So I kneeled down and was like, you know, how are you? What's going on? And then he's like, are you new Muslim or how long have you been Muslim? Like, alhamdulillah, you know, a while, you know, over a decade and whatnot. And then he goes, immediately from that, first question, second question, not question. Then he was like, it's haram to wear a necklace for a man. Dang. And because I was wearing my beads. I was wearing my tasbih, my dhikr beads around my neck, tucked in, but you could just see them around the back of my neck. And so I just looked at him and I was like, first of all, I was like, I mean, my first thought was like, are you sure? Right, exactly. Like, are you sure that there's absolute unanimous, you know, consensus that this is an impermissible act? Which is not, no. Because obviously it's not. Precisely. Like, obviously it's not. I'm sure somebody said it's not. It is, you know? But, like, you'll see great scholars or ulama wearing their beads around their neck. Like, so it's just, and, you know, but the point was like, did I really want to get in that conversation? Exactly. So I just, like, because I didn't, I was just like, okay. like not, like, I was just like, okay. Because I want, and then he was like, yeah, and it's impermissible for men to wear bracelets. And, like, it was funny because, like, while he was saying that, he was wearing a watch, which, like, there's no problem. Like, I have no problem wearing a watch, but it's like, explain to me, so you can wear a bracelet that has, like, a spinning timepiece, but not a bracelet that doesn't. Like, it just, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's no unanimous consensus about these things. And so I was just like, okay. And I left. You know, it's whatever. But just those type of interactions where it's like, bro, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me. And that's like the first thing. Like you, and like you actually want me to change my life because of something that you're telling me, you not knowing anything about me, and really not even knowing anything about what you're talking about. But I should, like, I had another experience like that, you know, that where in another mosque, this is in America, where this like older gentleman came up to me afterwards. I told you about this, where he was like, why do you have long hair?
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't have long hair. You should cut your hair. And I was like, well, why? And, again, like, are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, well, I know that's from your culture, but like you're Muslim now and this and this. And I was just like, what was hilarious about it in that moment is like, he was from a culture. He happened to be Pakistani. No offense, Pakistani. It's all right.
We love y'all.
But I love biryani. Shalwar kameez. I'll rock that sometime. No, but so he was basically like telling me that like in Islam men don't have long hair. And what was hilarious is what he didn't realize is that he was actually committing the exact thing that he was accusing me of, which is that he was putting his culture over Islam.
Exactly.
Because the Prophet of God had long hair.
Yeah.
The sunnah is to have long hair. I was actually following the sunnah, but in his contemporary modern Pakistani culture, long hair indicates, I don't even know what it indicates, irreligiosity, effemininity, rebelliousness from the, like whatever.
Yeah.
And the brother who's the imam, who happens to be a friend of mine, he later told me, he's like, what it is a lot of the, like in their generation, like you can't have long hair as a man. But a lot of the young, like Pakistani kids that grew up in America, their kids, they all want to have long hair and, ponytails and whatever, and braids. And so they're freaking out.
Exactly.
So they see like me they feel like I'm basically a bad influence on their kids. So he's trying to but it's a
curve that,
The point is like, the beauty is that like if you have a bit of like exposure, not even like knowledge, but you have exposure to true scholars, like then you realize, and you're not affected. Like I'm not gonna have my feelings hurt, I'm not going back to that mosque, but it's just like, you literally don't know. But it's so frustrating that people that don't know are the ones that like take it upon themselves to condemn others or say you should, whereas like a counter example to that is really profound is my friend Sheikh Yahya Rodas. He told me that when he was in Mauritania with Sheikh Marabat al-Hajj, one of the great sages of the previous generation who recently passed away, and you're literally out in the straight desert in a tent, right? And so, but this is a great sheikh, and Sheikh Yahya was a young man, early 20s, and Sheikh Yahya doesn't really have much of a beard now, but even those days he had like almost nothing, right? He just has like a little bit on his chin and a mustache, right? So, like, he just doesn't grow hair on his cheeks, basically. But he was mentioning that for, like, weeks he was there studying with Marabat al-Hajj, but he was never, like, alone with the sheikh. There was always a bunch of people around, because it's a big sheikh and a lot of students and whatever. And then one time he found himself just alone with the sheikh. Other people left. And he said, Sheikh Marabat al-Hajj, looked around, literally left and right, very overtly, to see if anybody could hear. And then he leaned into him, and he said, it's impermissible to shave, to be clean shaven. And Yahya said he told him, he said, Sheikh, I don't shave, I just don't grow hair on my face. And he said the sheikh was like, okay, no problem, man. Okay, that's good, that's fine. He genuinely thought he didn't know. Maybe in his culture, people are clean shaven. He doesn't know. He's a new Muslim. Right. So but look at that. He didn't want to embarrass him.
Exactly.
He waited for weeks rather than tell him in front of people or, you see what I'm saying? And he made sure no one was around so he could tell him that. And so that's Deen. That's people with knowledge. That's people that are really following the prophetic way. In subtle things like that, let alone, bigger things. And I think, in our community, we suffer. There's a lot of weird judgment. People just feel like I need to tell you what you're doing wrong. And it's such a weird ego trip because if you really care about someone, you don't think because if you really care about someone, you want to tell them something in a way that's most likely to benefit them.
Yeah, sure.
And it's I heard somebody say, I think Ubaydullah Ibn said this. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If I knew that you really care about me, you're my brother, and you look out for me, and we've established that, and if I needed something, I could reach out to you. Then if you tell me something, like, yo, bro, I think you should do this or not do this, or then I'm listening. Yeah. But if you're just someone off the street, and like we don't, and that's the other thing about like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like he lived amongst his people for 40 years. Yeah. He was known as the trustworthy. Mm-hmm. He was the one they would come for disputes. They would leave their debts with him. Mm-hmm. And then when he would call them, he called them from that perspective. Yeah, exactly. He didn't just go, okay, do this, don't do this. Mm-hmm. And so like, we seem to have lost that to a certain extent, you know?
Yeah, who said that? My friend Bashir said the other day, I was talking to him, he said, I don't take criticism from people I wouldn't take advice from. Mm. You know? SubhanAllah, it hit me heavy. And then another friend of mine was giving me a perspective on the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, when Jibreel alayhi salam came to the companions and they didn't know who he was, and they were all bugging out, you know, because here's this person that comes, he's a stranger, right. We don't know who he is, he's so fresh and so clean in the desert, and he's addressing the Prophet by Muhammad, right? Mm. She said that because of all these things, they were so caught up on these things that he were doing that they completely lost the message. It wasn't until later at the end he said, do you know who that was? Mm-hmm. That was Jibreel, and he came to teach you your religion. Mm-hmm. So had they known where he came from the beginning, it would have changed the whole dynamic of how that experience happened. So sometimes because we don't understand where people come from, we get so caught up in that we miss out on the whole message. So if you know where someone comes from, that changes your whole experience, how you interact with them. But if you don't know where they come from, you're going to be so caught up on these little things. Look at his necklace, look at his hair, look at his wearing his shoes, like look at his shirt. But where does he come from? What lesson did he come to teach? Like, how can I benefit? You know, or asking. So that's a perspective as well.
That's real, man. And that's, you know, Leah, I love what Bashir said. Shout out Bashir Jones, mashallah, beautiful brother. But I love that. You know, don't take a criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice. And the other thing I was thinking, man, I have like new rule, right? And next time someone is like that I don't know, is like, you should do this or you shouldn't do that, I'm gonna be like, give me $1,000.
Right.
And they're like, what you mean? Why would I give you $1,000? You're not gonna give me $1,000? No. Then I'm not taking advice from you. Because anybody that actually loves me and cares about me, my friends, my family, if I was like, yo, I need $1,000, here's $1,000. Like that's a good marker of like who really cares about you. Like who would give you $1,000 if you need it? Right. And so if you don't care enough about me to do something for me, then you don't get to have an opinion about my life. And I'm going to try to apply that to myself. Because if I wouldn't give you $1,000, I don't even have an opinion about your life. I like,
that's it.
You know what I mean? Like, do whatever you want. Like, that's your thing. I don't.
Boy, you're gonna be hard pressed to get some advisors.
Be like, yo, don't be friends with him, man. He's always asking for $1,000, bro.
Don't advise that brother, man.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, man. It was good to talk to you, bro. We'll wrap it up, but for people that are listening, how can people connect with you or your work or your, man, we didn't even talk about your suit. So let people know where they can find you or what you're doing and follow up.
So YoussefKromah.com, that's YOUSSEFKROMAH. We're going to be launching in the next few weeks the Youssef Kromah collection online, where you can go directly to the website and purchase a suit. But for the most part, you can find me on social media. On Facebook, just my name, Youssef Kromah. On Instagram is the same thing, Youssef.Kromah, YOUSSEF.KROMAH. But we have a men's suit collection, tailor-made suits. We're going to be doing some made-to-measure suits as well. And we have some excellent West African-inspired two-pieces that we're about to drop. You know, alhamdulillah, man, we have some nice things going on. So you can come through. Why not suit yourself? Get fresh, get tailor-made. And get the barakah of supporting a student of knowledge, mashallah.
No, some fly suits, man, and I still need we got to do my measurements. I still need a suit, bro, and I don't know, man, Path and Present, maybe we should have some sponsors, bro. Maybe the Youssef Kromah collection should be the sponsor. You know
yeah, there we go.
Let people know. Alhamdulillah. Allah bless you, bro. Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.